Welcome to My Latest Fixation. I'm Joshua, and I have a habit of digging into things that don't quite make sense. Think of this as a cabinet of curiosities for the beautifully bizarre. From lonely cryptids wandering through the static, to horror, gaming, obscure history, and the strange little piece of human connection. This is where we take a closer look at all the odd little things that don't quite add up. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's see where this one takes us. Okay, so I need to tell you about this weird, wonderful thing called Summerween, because it is honestly one of the best examples I can think of where a cartoon joke somehow escaped into real life. And I know that sounds fake already, but it's not. Summerween started in Gravity Falls, and then years later it started showing up again as a real seasonal internet thing. That is such a strange sentence, but it's true. A fictional holiday from a cartoon somehow stuck around long enough that people began treating it like something they could actually celebrate, which is ridiculous in the best possible way. So today, I want to talk about this whole thing with you. First, the original Gravity Falls episode, the way fans kept it alive, then how it started showing up again online and in seasonal culture. So, let's start with the episode itself, because if you haven't seen it, I really want you to picture it. The episode is called Summerween, and it aired in 2012 on Gravity Falls. The show is set during Dipper and Mabel Pine's summer vacation, so the whole thing already has a slightly off-season feeling. It's summer, but strange things are always happening, because that's just how the show works. And then the town of Gravity Falls decides to celebrate Halloween anyway. Not in October, in June. That's the joke. It's a great one. The show leans all the way into the visual contradiction. You've got spooky decorations sitting under green pine trees. You've got people trick-or-treating while wearing shorts and t-shirts. You've got jack-o'-melon instead of jack-o'-lanterns, because the holiday has to fit the season somehow. And that image alone is funny, because it's not just Halloween again. It's Halloween awkwardly wedged into summer, and the show knows exactly how weird that looks. And honestly, the way Gravity Falls pulls this off is why the episode works so well. The town itself already feels like a place where the normal rules are slightly bent. So when everybody is suddenly acting like Halloween has been imported in the wrong month, it doesn't feel random. It feels like the town is fully committed to this bit. The Mystery Shack is right in the middle of it, which makes sense because the Mystery Shack always feels like the place where Gravity Falls would put something absurd and make it worse on purpose. It's part tourist trap, part family business, part general location for strange nonsense, so of course Summerween happens there. And then there's the Summerween Trickster, which honestly is one of the best monster concepts in the show. The Trickster is tied to the loser candy idea, which is such a perfect phrase because you immediately know what it means. It's the candy nobody wants. The generic stuff, the weird leftovers. And I have to be honest, I do actually kind of love the loser candy, not because it's good. It's not necessarily good. It's just so bad it becomes funny. But it works because it's a little gross and a little spooky. The show turns trash candy into a monster, and somehow that feels exactly right. The Trickster's whole deal is that the kids need to collect 500 pieces of candy to satisfy him. That gives the episode a real deadline, which is important because now the holiday isn't just a cute premise. It has stakes. It has pressure. It has that classic kids' adventure feeling where the night is fun, but also maybe deeply unsafe. And that's why the episode works so well. It doesn't just say, wouldn't Halloween and summer be funny? It says, what if Halloween and summer had an actual monster, an actual goal, and actual consequences? That is very Gravity Falls. And the episode also gives Summerween a date in people's minds, which helps it feel real. In the show, Summerween is associated with June 22nd, though some references also point to the second to last Friday of June. Either way, it's a concrete date, which makes the whole thing feel like an actual holiday instead of just a joke. That matters more than it sounds like it should. Because once a fictional holiday has a date, people can start anchoring to it. They can mark it on their calendar. They can say, oh right, Summerween's coming up. And that's one of the little things that makes a made-up idea easier to keep alive. The episode also has a very specific Gravity Falls visual rhythm where the funny thing and the creepy thing are happening at the same time. It never fully lets the holiday become pure parody. There's always a little edge to it. The town is smiling, but the episode is still reminding you that this is the show where weird things can absolutely get out of hand. That balance is why people remember it so clearly. Okay, but let's stay with the candy thing for a second, because I think that this is where a lot of people connect with the episode on a very personal level. Everyone has bad candy memories. You know what I mean. You dump out the plastic pumpkin, or the pillowcase, or the giant bowl on the kitchen table, and half of it is stuff you don't even consider candy so much as an apology. Knockoff candy corn, waxy little strawberry hard candies wrapped in clear cellophane, mystery taffy, those peanut butter things that somehow always feel dusty, the black and orange wrapped stuff that looked festive but tastes like a bad decision. That's the loser candy. And not in a mean way, in a deeply accurate way. It's the candy you sort through as a kid with very serious opinions. You immediately separate the good stuff from the I guess this exists stuff. The chocolate bars go into one pile, the gummy candy goes into another. And then there's a pile of things that make you say, who is this for? And I think that's part of why the Trickster lands so well. Because it taps into something very specific and very universal. The weird disappointment of bad Halloween candy. It's also just funny to think about bad candy becoming a monster. That's one of the ideas that shouldn't work, but somehow does. Because the emotional memory is already there, everyone knows what trash candy feels like. Everyone knows the little ritual of sorting through the haul and quietly deciding which pieces are getting traded, tossed, or left untouched until the end of time. So when Gravity Falls turns that into the basis of a monster, it's not just a random spooky gag. It's tapping into a shared childhood experience. And I think that's part of why Summerween struck as a concept. It's not just the holiday itself. It's the emotional memory of Halloween. It's the candy, the costumes, spooky decorations, a little bit of fear, a little bit of excitement, and a little bit of sugar-fueled chaos. Summerween borrows all of that and drops it into a season where it shouldn't really belong. Which is funny, but it's also comforting in a strange way, because everyone already knows what Halloween feels like. So when you say Halloween in summer, people instantly understand the joke. They can picture it. They can feel it. And that makes the whole thing easy to keep talking about. The candy part also gives you a really good emotional anchor in the podcast, because it's not just lore, it's memory. Almost everyone has some version of the same story. The candy haul on the rug, the sorting, the immediate disappointment when you hit the bottom layer and realize it's all the weird stuff nobody asked for. And that's why the loser candy idea works so well as a recurring bit. It doesn't have to be deep, it doesn't have to be recognizable. And honestly, I do think there's something kind of funny about admitting that I would absolutely be the person who says I like the loser candy. Not because it's objectively good, it's not, but because there's something so charmingly wrong about candy being so bad it becomes memorable. That's the whole vibe. So, why did Summerween outlive the episode? I think part of the answer is just that the idea is simple and memorable. You hear it once and you don't forget it. Summerween sounds like a real word. It sounds like something that should already exist. That matters more than people think. Some fictional ideas catch on because they're so specific that they feel real. Summerween is like that. It's not vague, it's not abstract, it's just Halloween in summer. You get it immediately. But the other reason it stuck is that Gravity Falls has the kind of fan base that notices these things and keeps them alive. The show had a reputation for details. People watch it closely. They talked about the mysteries. They posted theories. They made fan art. They shared references. Summerween fit perfectly into that world because it felt like a local tradition inside the show, not just a one-off joke. So after the episode aired, the concept lived on in fandom spaces. It got referenced, it got memed, it got discussed. It became one of those little pieces of show lore that people liked bringing back up every summer. And if something gets repeated enough in fandom, it starts to feel a little more real. That's not magic, that's just how culture works. People keep a thing alive because they enjoy it, and then eventually it stops being only a reference and starts becoming part of the seasonal rhythm, which is kind of what happened here. What I like about that is that it's not some huge engineered cultural rollout. It's just people liking a joke enough to keep it around. It's a very internet kind of story, but it's also a very human one. If something makes people smile, they'll return to it. If it becomes a good seasonal reference, they'll bring it back up every year. And if it's visually simple enough and funny enough, it has a decent chance of surviving longer than the thing that made it famous. That's Summerween in a nutshell. Now, this part matters because I don't want to make it sound like Summerween went from a 2012 cartoon episode to a giant real-world trend overnight. It didn't. There was a long bridge in between. For years, the idea mostly lived online. Fans kept it going, social platforms gave people a place to joke about it, post about it, and play with it. Tumblr and Reddit were natural homes for that kind of fandom-specific weirdness because those things are where people like taking the one idea and running with it. Then, over time, the culture around seasonal aesthetics changed too. People got more interested in micro-holidays, more interested in themed content, more interested in making basically any season into a mood. And once you already have a spooky aesthetic community online, Halloween in summer becomes a very easy thing to understand and remix. Then the pandemic years changed the cultural mood as well. In 2020 and 2021, people were home more. And a lot of people were leaning into the comfort culture, nostalgia, and small seasonal rituals. It's reasonable to think that it made it playful, low-stakes trends like this one feel even more appealing, even if that part is more interpretation than hard fact. So by the time the trend got bigger in the mid-2020s, it didn't come out of nowhere. It landed on top of years of fandom memory, internet remix culture, and a broader appetite for playful season identity. That's the bridge. And honestly, that bridge is what makes the whole thing feel believable. Because if you just jumped from cartoon episode to real trend, it would feel too neat. But if you slow it down and think about the years in between, it makes sense. People kept the idea alive because it was fun to repeat, easy to recognize, and simple to repurpose. That's usually how these things go. Not with a huge bang, but with a lot of little repeats. Okay, so now let's talk about the modern version, because this is where the visual side really takes off. If you scroll through a Summerween post now, you're usually going to see some version of the same idea. Spooky imagery dropped into a summer setting. Maybe it's a pool party, maybe it's a backyard barbecue, maybe it's a short little video where someone is floating on the black coffin-shaped pool floaty while drinking a watermelon smoothie out of a skull mug. Maybe there are plastic bats hanging from a patio umbrella. Maybe there are candles on a picnic table. That's the appeal. It's the clash. Halloween usually belongs to colder air, darker evenings, crunchy leaves, and all of that fall atmosphere. Summer is the exact opposite of that. It's bright, it's sweaty, It's pools, ice cream, sunscreen, sunburns. So putting spooky stuff into summer creates this hilarious visual mismatch, and the internet loves a mismatch. That's why Summerween content tends to do so well. It photographs well, it films well, it gives people a chance to be theatrical without needing a huge budget. You don't need a holiday budget. You don't need a formal holiday budget. You need a watermelon, maybe a black tablecloth, some spooky decorations, and the willingness to commit a little bit. That's enough. And honestly, that's part of the charm. Summerween doesn't require perfection. It just requires enthusiasm. It also helps that the whole thing is pretty easy to understand in one glance. You don't need a full explanation to get why it works. Spooky stuff in summer is funny on sight. It's one of the reasons it travels so well online. And if you want to think about what makes it visually effective, it's basically this. Summer is usually all brightness and ease, and Halloween is usually all shadow and mood. So when you smash those two together, the result is instantly funny and instantly memorable. That's why a simple image of a skull cup by a pool can feel like enough. The joke is already in the contrast. So what does a Summerween party actually look like? Honestly, it's kind of like Halloween got invited to a backyard barbecue and decided to lean all the way in. The whole joke is that everything about the setting is a little wrong in a way that makes it better. You're not in Crestfall Air, you're not surrounded by dead leaves, you're in a hot yard. Maybe a pool, maybe a patio, and everyone's still committing to the spooky bit anyway. That means the decorations have to adapt. Instead of a front porch covered in autumn leaves, you've got black tablecloths outside, orange string lights hanging from a fence, plastic bats clipped to patio umbrellas, or fake cobwebs stretched between lawn chairs like somebody really meant it. You might see skull caps next to paper plates, spooky napkins next to sunscreen, and a giant bowl of candy sitting next to the pitcher of lemonade or punch. It's Halloween energy, but with the sense that everyone is also mildly overheated. The food is where it gets really funny, because Summerween has to work around the fact that nobody wants to be standing over a stove in full October mode. So you get things like carved watermelon instead of carved pumpkins, red punch that looks a little too dramatic, cupcakes with candy eyeballs on top, popsicles shaped like ghosts, or chips and dip arranged in a vaguely haunting looking spread. The whole idea is not to make it actually scary. It's to make it feel festive and slightly absurd. And the outfits are part of the joke too. You're not putting on heavy costume in the middle of summer and pretending that's comfortable. So people end up improvising. Maybe it's a vampire cape over shorts. Maybe it's a skeletal shirt with sunglasses. Maybe it's just a spooky accessory or a little dramatic makeup that doesn't stand a chance against the heat. That's what makes it fun. Nobody's trying to recreate October. They're making a summer version of Halloween. And the mismatch is the whole point. That's really what a Summerween party is. A bunch of people knowingly celebrating a holiday of the wrong season. And that wrongness is exactly why it works. It's playful, it's goofy, and it feels like everyone in the room is in on the joke. But there's also a bigger cultural pattern here that Summerween fits into really neatly. People have been into spooky aesthetics year-round for a while now. Black clothes and warm weather, horror movie marathons in July, goth decor that never really goes back in the closet, seasonal identity that doesn't wait politely for the calendar. Summerween sits right inside that world. It also lines up with the way retailers treat Halloween, which is part of why their trend feels more visible once it picks up. Stores have long been known for putting out Halloween merchandise earlier and earlier. Some people in the Halloween fandom use Code Orange as a shorthand for the start of that early seasonal rollout. That creates a funny contrast, because Halloween is usually associated with dying leaves, cold air, and long shadows, Summer is the season of pools, bright lights, barbecue smoke, and too much sunscreen. Those two worlds are basically oppositions. That's why mixing them is so entertaining. It's not just Halloween early, it's Halloween with the wrong weather. And that mismatch is the whole joke. But it's also why Summerween works as an internet trend. It lets people enjoy spooky stuff without waiting for the traditional season. It turns a contradiction into the appeal. And honestly, summer and horror have always been going together better than people think. Jason Voorhees is basically proof of that. Friday the 13th turns a summer camp into something creepy, which is kind of the whole magic of the genre. Takes a place that should feel safe and fun and makes it unsettling. So Summerween isn't inventing that contrast, it's just giving a playful name and a cartoon glow. That's what I like about the Jason comparison. It doesn't mean he caused Summerween. It just shows that the basic idea already makes sense. Summer can be bright and fun, sure, but it can also be eerie in a very specific way. Horror has known that for a long time. And I think that's a useful thing to mention because it helps the listener zoom out. Summerween is funny because it's a cartoon holiday, yes. But it also works because it's plugged into a bigger horror tradition that already understands summer as a great place to get creeped out. I think the real reason Summerween keeps coming back is that it feels easy to join. You don't need to be a super fan of Gravity Falls to understand it. You do not need a long explanation. You don't need a strict tradition. You just need to like the idea of spooky stuff in summer. That's it. And because it's so flexible, people can make it as elaborate or as simple as they want. For some people, it's a full themed party. For other people, it's just a carving a watermelon and posting a picture. For some, it's a joke. For some, it's a real seasonal ritual. For some, it's just a reason to do something fun with friends when the weather is too hot and everyone is looking for an excuse to make the season feel less boring. That flexibility is a huge strength. A lot of cultural trends get too specific or too self-serious. Summerween avoids that. It stays playful. It stays light. It never asks too much of anyone. And that makes it easy to keep alive. And I think there's something kind of lovely about that. It's a fictional holiday that became a real excuse for people to have fun. That's the whole thing. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. It's not trying to be the deepest thing in the world, it just gives people a way to enjoy spooky vibes when the weather says they technically shouldn't. That's enough. Sometimes, that's more than enough. So yeah, that's Summerween. It starts as a fictional holiday in Gravity Falls. It gets a very specific visual identity. It lives on in fandom for years. Then it starts showing up again as an internet trend and a real seasonal vibe. And now it sits in this funny little place where people know it's fake, but also kind of real, which is honestly one of the most internet things I can imagine. And I think that's why I like it so much. It's not trying to be deep, it's not trying to be important, it's just a weird, charming idea that made people smile, and then stuck around long enough to become part of the seasonal conversation, which is a pretty good outcome for a cartoon joke. So, if you ever wanted an excuse to do something spooky in June or July, congratulations, you now have one. Carve a watermelon, put on a costume, make a goofy little themed snack. That's Summerween, and that's kind of the whole point. And just like that, this week's obsession comes to an end. Thanks for getting wonderfully lost with me. If you'd like to keep this cozy corner of the strange alive, everything you need is waiting in the notes below. Or head over to my website, mylatestfixation.com, where the magic quietly hums. You can browse peculiar merch, learn the story behind the show, or leave a little offering. Spend $50 or more and you'll get free shipping. Have a dark history footnote, a lonely cryptid, or digital mystery you think I absolutely need to fixate on? Send your thoughts via carrier pigeon, if you could find one with a good sense of direction. Otherwise, the website worked much better. And if you enjoyed your stay, share the show with another kindred spirit. That's how our tiny, haunted hearth keeps growing. Stay curious, stay obsessed, and stay human.